For millennia, there's been this one story, this one legend that has captured the imagination like almost no other. It's the story of King Solomon's incredible wealth. We're talking about a source of gold and treasure so vast, it almost sounds like a fairy tale. Well, today, we're diving deep into the hunt for this lost legend, and we're going to see what's real and what's pure fantasy. You know, the whole legend really gets its fuel from accounts like this one, right out of the Bible. The Queen of Sheba rolls up to visit Solomon, and the gifts she brings are just off the charts. We're talking literally tons of gold and more rare spices than had ever been seen. This is the moment that cements his reputation as maybe the richest king who ever lived. And right away, that begs the question that's been driving people wild for centuries. This incredible treasure came from a place called Ophir. But where was it? Was it even a real place? This single question would become a lifelong obsession for one man in particular. And this is where our story really gets going. Let's meet Karl Mau. He was a German explorer, didn't come from much, but he became totally convinced that he and he alone was destined to find this source of Solomon's gold. And his story, well, it's one of just incredible, almost unbelievable determination. Can you believe it? It all started when he was just 10 years old. He gets an atlas for his birthday, opens it up to the map of Africa, and sees these huge, empty white spaces marked unexplored. For most kids, that's just a blank spot. For Mao, it was a calling. It was a promise of a mystery he had to solve. So what do you do when you decide to find a lost biblical land? Well, if you're Karl Mau, you spend the next 11 years preparing for it. And I mean really preparing. He taught himself multiple languages. He became a self-taught expert in geology, botany, even medicine. And physically, he would walk for miles and miles every single day, in heat, in snow, just to make his body tough enough for what was to come. This wasn't a hobby, it was an obsession. And you can just feel that intensity in his own words, can't you? He's basically saying, look, I've done all the homework, I've read all the books, but that's not enough. I've had to literally forge my body into a tool for this quest. He was all in. So after all that preparation, he gets to Africa, and for years, it's just brutal. He faces starvation, disease, he nearly dies multiple times. But he just keeps pushing. And then he starts hearing these rumors from local tribes, whispers of a magnificent city, a fortress of stone hidden deep in the wilderness. And then it happens. On September 5th, 1871, he's led by local guides and he climbs a rise, and there it is. A massive, walled city made of stone, unlike anything any European had ever seen in that part of the world. For Mao, after all those years of searching, this was it. This had to be the place. Okay, so how did he connect these ruins to King Solomon? He had what he saw as three key pieces of proof. First, the walls were built with these huge stones with no mortar, which perfectly matched some old Portuguese descriptions of the Queen of Sheba's palace. Second, and this was a common, unfortunate bias of the time, he just couldn't believe local Africans could have built something so sophisticated. He assumed it had to be white people from the ancient world. And third, the real clincher for him. He found a piece of wood that he was convinced was cedar from Lebanon, the exact same wood used to build Solomon's temple. And this quote, it says it all. There's no doubt in his mind. He wasn't just looking at some random ruins. He believed he was looking at a copy of the Temple of Solomon itself and a copy of the palace of the Queen of Sheba. Case closed. He had done it. He'd found Ophir. But of course, history is never quite that tidy. The world keeps turning. And a few decades later, a whole new kind of explorer shows up. These folks weren't carrying Bibles and relying on old legends. They were archaeologists, and they were armed with science. And they were about to take a very, very close look at Karl Mau's Ophir. The first pillar of Mau's theory to collapse was the age of the site. Mau needed these ruins to be 3,000 years old to fit the biblical timeline. But archaeologists started digging, and the pottery, the beads, all the artifacts they found told a completely different story. The city wasn't ancient. It was medieval, from around the 14th century. It was about 2,000 years too young. Okay, so what about the builders? Mao thought it had to be ancient Phoenicians. But the new scientific investigation found absolutely zero evidence for that. In fact, everything, the style of the stonework, the materials used, the artifacts found inside, it all pointed in one undeniable direction. This was a 100% indigenous African creation. And then, the final nail in the coffin, that crucial piece of wood, the cedar from Lebanon. You know how Ma identified it? He literally compared its smell and appearance to his own cedar pencil. That was it. When modern scientists actually analyzed the sample, turns out it wasn't cedar at all. It was a type of local African sandalwood. And with that, Ma's entire theory just evaporated. And here's the truly tragic part of the story. Karl Mau never really got to see his discovery celebrated or even properly debunked. He went back to Germany, but he was broke, sick, and his incredible finds were mostly dismissed. He died at just 37 years old. A sad, quiet end for a man with such a monumental obsession. So if Karl Mau was wrong, if he didn't find the biblical land of Ophir, then what on earth did he stumble upon in the middle of Africa? Well, it turns out he found something real, something historical, and frankly, something even more amazing. He found the lost city of Great Zimbabwe. The true story is just incredible. Great Zimbabwe was the capital of a huge and powerful African kingdom, built by the ancestors of the modern Shona people. At its height, this was a buzzing metropolis of more than 10,000 people. It was the heart of a trade network that stretched all the way to Arabia and even China. Today, it's recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's such a symbol of national pride that the entire country of Zimbabwe is named after it. All right, so Mau's quest led us to this incredible lost African city. But that still leaves our original question hanging, doesn't it? If Great Zimbabwe wasn't the source of Solomon's wealth, does that mean the whole story is just a myth? Well, not so fast. The search is far from over. And first, a really fun fact. That famous phrase, King Solomon's mines, you won't actually find it anywhere in the Bible. It was totally made up. A novelist named H. Rider Haggard invented it for an adventure book in 1885. And guess what his inspiration was? The news reports about Karl Mau's discovery of those mysterious ruins in Africa. A piece of fiction inspired by a mistaken identity became a world-famous legend. Now, for a long time, one of the big problems was that there was no physical evidence for King Solomon, or even his father, King David, outside of the Bible. But that's changed. Archaeologists recently unearthed this stone inscription from the 9th century BC that clearly mentions the House of David. It's the first real, concrete proof that this royal dynasty wasn't just a story. And what about the mines? Okay, so we haven't found giant gold mines yet, but archaeologists in Jordan have found something just as impressive: massive industrial-scale copper mines. And when were they cranking out the most copper? Right around the 10th century BC, the exact time King Solomon was said to be ruling. Copper back then was like oil today, incredibly valuable. This is hard evidence of a kingdom with immense industrial wealth during that specific period. Which kind of brings us to a final thought here. The hunt for Solomon's gold led Karl Mau to accidentally rediscover the glory of Great Zimbabwe, completely changing our understanding of African history. And the modern search for those same mines is now revealing the true industrial might of these Bronze Age kingdoms. So maybe the whole point of these quests isn't the gold at all. Maybe the real treasure is the incredible, complicated, and amazing true stories of our past that we dig up along the way.